In South Korea, Yoon Suk-yeol has been sworn in as to become the country's 13th president. He had the narrowest margin of victory in the history of the vote by less than 1%. Mr. Yoon has pledged to get tough on North Korea and to bolster the security alliance with the US. Well, I'm joined now by our correspondent, Jean McKenzie, who is in Seoul. And Jean, tell us a bit more about Mr. Yoon to start off with.
Well, Mr. Yoon is a political novice. Up until now, he's been a prosecutor. He was the country's top prosecutor, and he only entered politics when he decided to launch his campaign less than a year ago. So that means that he's got a tough task ahead of him, because not only this, as you say, he won the election by an absolute whisker, by 0.7%. And he actually enters office with the lowest approval rating of any new president here in South Korea. And add to that, he doesn't have control over the parliament here. The National Assembly is still run by the opposition party, and they can block some of his legislation. So really, he's got a task to bring together a very divided country and a dissatisfied country. This is an election that was fought on domestic issues. You have here in South Korea rising unemployment, rising inequality, skyrocketing house prices. And Mr. Yoon today at his inauguration ceremony, in his speech, he reflected some of those economic troubles, and also, said that South Korea is not immune from those problems that the rest of the world is going through, those rising energy prices and food prices, and acknowledged that work was going to need to be done to tackle these. But as well as inheriting this divided and dissatisfied country, he also takes on, I guess, a more dangerous and challenging world.
What are his priorities, Jean, in terms of foreign policy?
Well, first of all, starting close to home, he has his neighbour, North Korea, to deal with, and he's going to have to decide really how to confront a North Korea that's becoming increasingly hostile, especially as he has said from the outset that he's going to take a much harder line than his predecessor on North Korea. North Korea, for years now, has refused to engage in nuclear talks. It has been choosing to build up its arsenal of nuclear weapons. They are becoming more dangerous and more sophisticated. And just this week, we've seen North Korea test 2 of its weapons. We're expecting more to come because we know North Korea has a habit of testing new governments to try and gain some leverage in any future potential negotiations. The other thing that Mr. Yoon Suk-yeol has said, though, is that he wants to spend less time focusing on North Korea and more time looking at his relationships with the rest of the world, particularly in building up his alliance with the United States. But in order to do that, he's going to have to delicately balance the relationship that he has with China, because, of course, China is South Korea's largest trading partner. So that balance between the US and China becomes trickier, the more the tensions rise between the US and with China. So essentially, with this president, we have somebody who wants to do things very differently when it comes to foreign policy and domestic policy, but he might find that he is rather constrained and has less room to manoeuvre than he thinks.
Jean, thank you very much indeed. Jean McKenzie there, our correspondent in Seoul.